Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and in this video we're going to be taking a look at some interviews that Naoki Yoshida did recently with a bunch of Japanese media websites. Now, as per usual, we've got to make sure to credit the source of this information, obviously Game Watch, Dengeki Famitsu, and Gamer Interviews, but of course we have to thank Carrier of Light. We've referenced them a ton of times on these different translation videos when we cover the various interviews that happen, so thank you, Carrier of Light. There will be a source link in the description if you want to go give them upvotes, Reddit karma, whatever that good stuff is that lets people know they're doing a good job over on Reddit. And you are doing a good job, Carrier, so thank you. There's a lot of information here, so expect this video to go on the longer side. Look who you're watching anyway. So, this is all about 4.3. Some of it's a little bit past that. There's story stuff, Domain reconstruction stuff, Ultimate Weapon stuff, everything. So if there's anything you don't want to know, there's not going to be any like spoilers, but if there's just things you don't want to know, I guess warning now. Anyway, let's get started with the first part, talking about the main story of patch 4.3. This will be the conclusion of the Doma side of the Stormblood story, and they would like to reiterate the trailer did not include the enemy for the new trial, which people are suggesting could be one of two things, or a couple of other possibilities as well. But with the doggo mount, the mount from the Extreme Trial being revealed over on the 4.3 website, people are leaning more towards one side than the other. They understand the rewards from side quests aren't worth it too much. It's difficult changing current side quests. They'll consider adjusting EXP from the quests they add in the future. I'm assuming just talking about quests that aren't part of the main story directly, just your average side quest out in the world. So might be seeing a buff to newer side quests, especially going into 5.0, and the amount of experience points they actually reward. You'll be going to the new dungeon because of the Four Lord story. Now that surprised me. I was pretty sure that we were going to go there as part of the main story. One of the big reasons is because one of the big things they moved away with Hildebrand was putting trials behind Hildebrand's storyline. I guess that was probably because it was about to span past multiple expansions. I don't know if you heard that. Thank you, LA. So I was surprised to see them now doing a chain of dungeons available, because now it's basically dungeon, trial, dungeon, all available from the Four Lords side story quest. Maybe because it's all still within the same expansion, they don't mind doing that. But if you haven't done Byakko yet, you're going to have to do that to get to the Swallow's Compass to unlock your Expert Roulette for patch 4.3. Now, Japanese players were assuming the title of the dungeon was hinting at a new job. This is funny, because apparently in Japan, the dungeon itself is called the Ghost Temple of Geomancy. For us, it's called the Swallow's Compass. But if you didn't know, the Swallow's Compass is the tomb to the first king of Doma, or I guess the first leading figure. I don't know if they were called kings. And he was the one who founded Geomancy. So a lot of people are, definitely on the suspicion train when it comes to Geomancer being a job for patch 5.0, especially if you've also done the Astrologian questline. But if you've done the Astrologian questline, you know how they're kind of defined in the game, so it's not dead set that they will be in 5.0. It's just something that a lot of people, and myself included, definitely think is leading a little bit into, yeah, we're probably doing this territory. The next trial against the Four Lords will be in 4.4. So whether that's Suzaku, Seiryu, whatever it is, it'll be in 4.4. So next up we have the Domain reconstruction. Now this is basically something like, and they're going to say this here in the translation, something like Mordona and Idleshire. You know how patch by patch they would gradually become more, I guess, visually impressive. So the Domain reconstruction is going to be us rebuilding Doma, pretty much. So there's a new Aetheryte that was added in 4.2. You can go there now. You take a boat over there in Yangja, and you'll see this area that you can't really do anything in just yet. Now the NPCs in that area will actually buy items from you. Yeah, nothing too crazy. They just purchase, as they say here. They pay a little more for the usual NPCs when you sell items to them. Now, by selling a certain amount of items you don't need to the NPCs here, the reconstruction of the town begins, and the amount of money they pay you will gradually increase. So items that you find yourself vendoring, you will probably find yourself wanting to go vendor them over in the Domain reconstruction area. Now, based on a screenshot that we saw, I don't think you can just vendor any item. Maybe you can, and I'm wrong, but when they showed us a screenshot over on the 4.3 website, it almost looked like there was a list of items that they wanted you to sell them, and if you sold those items to them, it would work. Maybe it's changed since that screenshot was put out. Maybe you just didn't interpret the screenshot correctly, but currently they're just saying you can sell items to them, items that you could sell to a regular NPC. There's a weekly limit to how much you can sell, so you can't progress through the Domain reconstruction faster than intended. And on top of that, there's going to be a comment on it a little bit later, I believe, down in the translations, where it's not so much like a new Mordona Idleshire, because the area is actually instanced to each player. So think of it like the Mughal beast tribes, or I guess a lot of the beast tribes area, how beast tribes areas, where the further you are visually, they change a little bit. It's going to work that way for Doma itself when we're participating in the reconstruction. So, and as the reconstruction proceeds, the town will change visually. So moving on, Disciples of Hand and Land. The new Namazu Beast Tribe story will revolve around bringing back a festival. They spent a serious amount of budget on the quest line. The original JP context hints this might have been that you were hiding this all along type of story / content they talked about in a previous interview. Now, that's not saying it definitely is, because I think a lot of people would have maybe higher expectations of, you know, that type of comment, even though it could literally mean anything. As for what that could be, I wonder if the festival itself, that's part of the quest line, is something that they mean when they say you were hiding this all along kind of thing. There's not much we could really take away from that, just that the Namazu quest line, they've put a little bit more work, or a considerable amount more work, into this quest line compared to the previous beast tribes. New gear and recipe for crafters and gatherers, and players will need to prepare this new gear in order to craft gather items in 4.4. So in other words, crafters gatherers, you're going to get some new stuff that you'll want to upgrade and meld and all that to get ready for the new recipes in 4.4. There will be another test case they'll be implementing, but cannot release further info now because it will affect the economy. I'm curious what that means. So test case usually just means it's something they're trying out. They don't know what's going to happen when they do it. And that could be any number of things, but they're apparently afraid it'll affect the economy in advance to it actually releasing. So we'll just have to wait and see. Apparently there's going to be some other crafter-gatherer change. Whether or not we'll see that in the preliminary patch notes, who knows? We'll be seeing those tomorrow. Players will need to finish the quest line related to Kurenai before they gain access to the new custom delivery. Those quests are already available in-game. If you haven't done the quests for Kurenai, go Google them, go to the Ruby Sea, and you'll hopefully be able to find them and get them done. Also, just reiterating, you'll be able to change what Kurenai wears, and if there's enough demand, they'll add it to the old custom delivery NPCs as well, that of Sloey and Monago. Now we're talking about the Ritterana Lighthouse. So players reacted to part 1 of Return to Ivalice, and they changed the course of the story to make it feel more epic. Now, I'm assuming this is in line with the comment they made about how much grander the story is for the next part of Return to Ivalice. They said that it is going to feel like they put as much effort into this side story as they did the main story, which for me is a tough thing to say because, you know, they voice act scenes and stuff like that in the main story, and I'm still just not confident that we'll see voice acting in the side quest that this ultimately is. But basically, the story is more epic than initially intended, so we can expect a really serious patch for Return to Ivalice, something that the Final Fantasy Tactics and Final Fantasy XII fans will probably fall in love with. There'll be new mysteries, you know, just connecting certain aspects of Final Fantasy XIV and making them part of Final Fantasy XIV's Ivalice. So just expect to be like, a lot. There's a lot of text in the new story. Questline's very long. They had mentioned previously there was crafting and gathering side quests involved in this. I don't know if that's that test case that they mentioned before, but there's no mention of it here. So I'm curious to see if that is still present, and hopefully we'll find out tomorrow. Ritterana is located somewhere in Eorzea, and this is a huge discussion here in this thread, because Eorzea makes up specifically Ilsabard and Aldenard and the surrounding islands. Ilsabard is where Garlemald is. That's very different from Eorzea. Yeah, Aldenard and all the islands surrounding it. Basically the original A Realm Reborn map. I guess also the Heavensward map before we went to Authard on the other side of the world, pretty much. So, but the question is, a lot of the times the devs kind of just refer to the entire planet as Eorzea whenever they're doing interviews. So it's, even though there's comments about him about talking about how it's on Hydaelyn, you know, somebody says, is it on Eorzea? They say yes, and then they start talking about Hydaelyn. Ultimately, let's just not read into the comment. There's a lot of confusion in the thread. It's clearly somewhere nearby, so let's just wait and see. There'll be brand new mechanics. The type of mechanic you'll be able to do as soon as you notice the trick, but they think people will be pretty excited when they see it. As for the rewards for 24-man, same as the previous 24-man raids, equipment, upgrade items for gear and accessories. When they ask if Yasmat will show up as a hidden boss like Proto Ultima, they said, who knows? But all I can say is, generally speaking, expectations shouldn't be betrayed. You should look forward to patch day. So basically saying he won't tell you if Yasmat's going to make any sort of appearance. And I like that they specifically say, like Proto Ultima. Although I think a lot of people would be surprised to see Yasmat and Proto Ultima kind of on the same, I just compared in the same way, just looking at how Proto Ultima just kind of falls over, and Yasmat has this massive sort of history and expectation. So I'm just gonna assume he's not there, and that if they are gonna do something with him, it'll be sometime later. Moving on to Eureka. Now, this is another big hot topic in this thread right here. The topic on there should be a penalty for those who just stay at the base camp. So this is referring to in Japan, instead of everyone kind of going to the hunt and AFKing where the notorious monsters in Eureka actually spawn, a lot of people in the Japanese data centers will actually wait at the base camp and not start running until they see that there's a notorious monster up. Yo, credit to them. If I tried to do that, I think I'd be dead by the time I got there. So, surprised to see that, but it's something that is a little bit more common on the Japanese data centers. Now, Pagos will start at elemental level 20 and lead up to level 30. So, once you're elemental level 20, instead of going to Anemos, you can go to Pagos, and you'll be able to go up to elemental level 30. To help players catch up, they'll be adjusting Anemos in 4.3. Now, that's important. Pagos comes out in 4.36. Anemos will be getting adjustments in 4.3. There's going to be weekly bonuses in your challenge log to hunt certain monsters of certain elemental affinities, and that bonus will apparently be pretty significant. Yeah, as a reminder, Pagos is 4.36. Now, for Pagos itself, they started talking about some things that they want to do to differentiate Pagos from Anemos. Now, we already know it's going up by 10 elemental levels. Another thing is that it's going to include more vertical elements. You'll be able to fall off, locations you can only reach by jumping from a higher ground. So it should have a more explorative style, and I guess it's going to feel really bad if you miss a jump. Or if you're piggybacking on somebody else's mountain, they miss the jump. On top of that, they're going to be adding another new feature called Happy Bunnies, which were in Final Fantasy XII. Now, these are not battle related. Instead, these are exploration related. So if you find a Happy Bunny, it will tell you that there are treasures hidden nearby, which we can assume it could be loot, it could be, whatever type of crystals are in the area. We don't exactly know what it is you'll be able to find, but it's something to distract people from just going from NM to NM. And what I'd like to assume is that for players that maybe want to avoid fighting and instead want to go treasure hunting, they now have this option instead. How viable it is, how frequent these Happy Bunnies appear, it's all information that we just don't have. But they're trying to give it some different aspects over Anemos, which is something I appreciate, and it gives me a little more hope for the zones that will come after Pagos as well. The final form of the Eureka weapon is far in the future and will have an extremely high item level, but until then, like always, the raid weapon will have the highest item level. I think there's a little bit of a cutoff at the bottom, so let me fix that real quick. There you go. Maybe it's just the text. Whatever. I'll just leave it as is. But anyway, so again, this is something that you should have expected if you've played 2.0, 3.0. In 2.x, the relic, when it became the Zodiac Braves weapon, it often found itself just about hitting the same item level as the raid weapon, just before the next item level increase would happen, and then at the very end of the expansion, obviously it caught up to it again, and then Heavensward came out. But the animal weapon, it matched it initially when it was released in 3.15, when Gordius weapon was 210, because it wasn't 215 for whatever reason, which they have a whole spiel about why that was a major problem with Gordius's design, or at least its loot design. So, for this one, for that animal weapon, after the Gordius weapon, it didn't match or exceed the raid weapon until the end of the expansion, 4.55, 4.56, one of those areas, or 3.55, 3.56, my bad. What they're saying is the final form of the Eureka weapon will not be better than the raid weapon until the end of the expansion. Around that time, whatever Eureka step is available, they will make that step, make it equal to an item level, and with the 5 materia slots, probably exceed the raid weapon itself. This is their way of trying to make sure the raid weapon remains the most relevant weapon for times where it needs to be relevant. At the end of an expansion, at that point, doesn't really matter as much. Pagos will have a lot of 11 related features. Now, I'm surprised to see the word features. For me, I just feel like, again, it's armor and maybe references, but maybe not like features, like straight up gameplay features. We don't know, so we'll wait. Big news. Now, this is a really big one, and I have a theory about this. You'll only be able to upgrade your weapon in Pagos. There will be no upgrades to the relic armor. Now, that's got a lot of people going, what? So I have a lot of theories about that. I think the most common one is that they don't want to invalidate the 24-man loot. They want people to always be looking for that in the odd-numbered patch as one of their options for new pieces of i360 stuff. On top of that, I think it's just they don't want to design a full new set every single patch. I have a hard time thinking of what, even if it's just adding a glow, they still have to go through a design process for each and every one of those armor sets. So while I do think the item level part of it is a big thing, they don't want to invalidate the 24-man stuff. I think they also just maybe don't have the resources to design 15 new sets every major patch. They could probably get the resources, in all honesty, but it's got to be a mix of things. I'm sure that people will ask them about it in future interviews, so we should probably just wait and not speculate on it too much. Take it at face value. I personally think that in 4.4 or 4.45, I guess, or 4.46, that the armor will be upgraded again. I think it's just because this odd numbered patch, they don't want to invalidate any of the gear before we hit the point later in the expansion where, again, it doesn't matter as much because a new expansion is on the way. Decided not to adjust the Magia board this time. However, in the future Eureka zones, the Magia board will feature some updates. And I'm assuming that's not just more Magicite. I'm assuming that it's actually like the way it functions, but who knows, because I don't exactly know what I would change about the Magia board. I just know it's ultimately not very interesting. It's just a serious point of power. The future Eureka weapons will also have 5 slots. So the Eureka weapon will always have 5 slots. That's a good thing to know for the future. Some more Eureka information here. You will need to finish the Anemo story and be elemental level 20 to enter Pagos. You cannot ride your mount at the start of Pagos, just like with Anemos, and they already know exactly where Eureka is going to take us. They planned out all the zones and everything for all the future patches. Next is the Ultima Weapon Ultimate Encounter. You are going to have to beat 08 Savage to enter, which means that's the only thing. You will not have to beat Ultimate Bahamut to do this. Only 08 Savage, God Kefka. Yoshi quoted certain NPC's line from the trailer. It said players will want to say, "This has to be a bad joke," right when experiencing the fight. For the English trailer, I'm assuming they're referring to the part at the end where everyone's arguing if it's Gaius or not. I think it's Gaius. But he says, "Oh dear," and then it shows all of the different primals, and it shows Ultima Weapon. And so I'm assuming that in the Japanese version, it says something else. And basically, that's the emotion that you're going to have going into the actual encounter after you see it. So now let's talk about the fight itself. This ultimate fight has a tremendously high tempo, but the total length of the fight is shorter. The ideas they dreamed of for Ultimate Titan will also be used in this fight. When they asked about the soundtrack, Yoshi P said, "All I can say is it wasn't the original Ultima Weapon theme." Now, we know that they're using the Primals rendition of Garuda, Ifrit, and Titan, the Primals being the rock band iteration of, Soken, Koji Fox, and the rest of the band. So I'm wondering, Ultima Weapon, I'm pretty sure, has a Primals rendition. I wonder if they'll do anything different from that, even. But for now, that's where I'm holding my expectation. The direction of difficulty is different compared to Bahamut. One of the big things is they once again did not go too far with DPS checks. They want you to solve the fight like a puzzle, rather than just, hey, you need to do a lot of damage, and that's the main thing here. So ultimately, I think this is more of an effort to try and make sure that you don't only want to take meta jobs because you need to hit the DPS checks. But when you do that, of course, when people can speed up a fight by bringing the most meta composition they can, it encourages that in a different way. There's really no way to fix it with fight design. It comes down to the way the jobs individually are designed. But with not having severe DPS checks, you should be comfortable bringing any job in as long as the player is skilled enough to beat the encounter. Now, the shape of the rewards, which again are weapons, are based on the original AF1 weapons. Now, if I'm not mistaken, AF1, it's been so long since I've had to designate them as AF or anything outside of the most recent expansion. I'm pretty sure those are the OG relics, which eventually became the Zodiac weapons. So I'm curious if that's what they mean, because I would have thought they were going to use the Primal Focus weapons, which were the Ifrit, Garuda, Titan Extreme. There was a quest line that you could get a weapon a week. I figured they would have used that at least for the jobs that, have those options. So for jobs that don't have an AF1 weapon, which, Heavensward and Stormblood, they'll choose a design that represents the job. So I'm really curious what those weapons end up looking like. I'm not going to lie, I don't know what some of the Dreadworm weapons look like for stuff like Samurai and Red Mage, so I guess I can't really even draw too deep of a conclusion there. But ultimately, expect it to, again, go all the way back. Because Ultimate Weapon didn't have weapons as a reward, he had accessories. And so they're going to go back to something from around that time frame for the game to talk about that. Speaking specifically, you could have been level 50 with all your job quests done by the time you fought Ultimate Weapon, I think. So it makes sense that it would be those first, level 50. Oh, you know what, though? That's not the relic. Yeah, I don't know. The relic would have been something that was a little bit different from that even. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Original AF1 weapons. Yeah? Wow. Okay. I probably just need to do a quick Google search after this and remind myself what a lot of that stuff looks like. The item level 80 weapon you get from the first relic quest line. Okay. Or I could have just read another line down. There you go. So there's some more stuff from the ultimate weapon interview here. Sorry, this is off by a little bit. It's bothering me. And so this comment has me excited. As someone who loves these brutally difficult encounters, the ultimate fight this time moves really fast. You might be surprised. After hearing the feedback from Ultimate, we made the total length of the fight shorter, and the battle will be over a few minutes faster than Bahamut. But in exchange, the phase transitions are faster. When a wipe occurs, it's going to be instant. For this ultimate fight, the gameplay will feel different compared to Bahamut. I'm worried if players can really beat it, he said that last time, but I'm sure the streams will be on fire during progression. I participated in the final adjustment, but the quantity and speed of the battle was far from something you can consume and learn in one go. Let's see. And we did hear feedback such as, I don't mind if they make it harder, just make it shorter. I think we were able to answer that demand, but it's not like we thought, well, then we'll just make it harder during development. I can't say anything more. Solving the puzzle is part of the skill, and we look forward to seeing players' progression. Great. I'm not going to lie. Everyone I know who did Ultimate, myself included, we all thought that, if this could be a few minutes shorter, but they can make it harder for the time that you're actually in there, I'm totally down for that. If that's the feedback they got, if that's the feedback they listened to, then awesome. I think with something like Ultimate, because of the number of people who actually complete it compared to the number of people who play the game is so astronomically low, it's a little bit easier to find the feedback that kind of matches the type of people who actively participate in the content, and I'm hoping we get something that really does match what's described here. Next, we have the Deep Dungeon, Heaven on High. Same idea as Palace of the Dead. Early floors for people who want to level alt jobs and want to work on the weapons for those jobs or for their main jobs as well. There is a storyline tied to it. We know that it has to do with the Confederacy, and the leader of the Confederacy makes sense considering where Heaven on High actually is. The story in the weapon upgrading part will end by floor 30. When your weapon is upgraded, you'll be able to take it outside as a level 70 weapon. You'll not be sharing save slots with the previous Deep Dungeon. That's good. I actually was wondering that. So it's good to confirm you have 2 save slots for Palace of the Dead, 2 save slots for Heaven on High. They do not interact with each other. Floors 31 to 100 is totally for challenge, just like floors 101 plus were for Palace of the Dead. There are rewards you can only obtain on those higher floors, such as the new Dodo mount. Only floors 31 plus, and who knows what the actual range is going to be for that Dodo mount. There are a lot of unique moves only the monsters in Heaven on High use, and as a reminder, you have to have pre-made parties for floor 31 plus. You cannot queue in with random people, mostly because they expect that if you go in with completely random people, you're not all on the same page, you're gonna have a bad time. There's also some more full-on interview information here. Now, he mentions here that it was made for those who wanted difficult 4-man content, so it's pretty hard. He designed it so you can't win if you don't use commanders properly, and he's also really happy to get those giant rooms to take up a whole floor in the later parts. Now, I could have swore during the live letter, the second or third floor he got onto was one of those big floors. Obviously, those are usually development builds that are kind of scripted to go that way. So the interview asks if they'll only see those big floors on 31 plus, and he says it's totally random which floor they will appear on. I think the word only kind of got forgotten in the answer there, because totally random implies 1 through 100. So I'm going to take his yes as the question either isn't translated 100% accurately, or that he didn't quite understand the question that was being presented to him by the interviewer. So I had to make sure I was recording because I'm so far into this. We saw the conclusion to the Edda story. How about this time? There will be a scenario to look forward to, but we're hoping that everybody ultimately just wants to complete it. They have similar motivations, and that this allows them to all work together regardless of what the reason they're in there is for. Now they're talking about job adjustments. So, and what sort of mounts can we expect the Dodo mount? And then if you reach the 100th floor, you'll understand why it's a Dodo mount. If you don't know, at the top of or at the bottom of Palace of the Dead at floor 200, there was either a glass pumpkin or I can't remember the other item. It was like it was an orb of some kind is all I can remember. So I'm curious what's on the 100th floor and if it's a complete joke like the 200th floor of Palace of the Dead. So for job adjustments, Samurai will get buffs to their DPS, combos are going to be buffed, and one of their actions is going to have enmity reduction add to it. Monk will also have enmity reduction added to one of their abilities. The concept is using it when necessary instead of automatically being in your strongest rotation. For me, that reads as Purification for Monk will be getting an enmity reduction aspect, as well as, I don't know, maybe Starry Eyes, or whatever the jump back skill is for Samurai. will have their enmity reduction, something along those lines. I'm not sure what it is that they'll add for. I don't know Samurai well enough, so just know that we'll both be getting some enmity reduction. For tanks, Dark Knight, they said that the demand based on feedback for Dark Knight, including removing how much you have to spam Dark Arts, those changes won't be possible in a regular patch for Dark Knight. So they're going to take some clear, understandable feedback and make adjustments for what they can do now. Improvements to usability, both buffs to their DPS and defensive capabilities. Hey, it's good to know that both offensively and defensively they will be receiving something. We kind of knew this already. And I'm more excited to see what happens to Dark Knight in the future. When we were watching the live letter, they said it would take something like 6 months to do a Dark Knight rework. So most of us had pretty much written it off for the expansion. Not that it couldn't happen in a major patch. Most of us probably just still aren't expecting it. But the fact that they are looking at that feedback and taking it that seriously, it does mean a lot to someone, even as someone who doesn't play Dark Knight. As for Warrior, all they can say is they're on a rampage. Thank you. Needed to know that. For Astrologian, they're making adjustments to draw, biting into your GCD, solving some MP problems. So, DPS spells will have their cast time reduced, and they'll also be adjusting potency and required MP for healing. Aspected Helios was a big one that was mentioned in the live letter, as it's mentioned again right here, so expect it to be in that. Black Mage, now this is a big one, because I was curious exactly what the wording meant during the live letter. They said they were making adjustments to the animations for ethereal manipulation between the lines. When I read into it, I thought it just meant they would make the teleport instant, and other people thought that they meant something else. We didn't know what. We will simply adjust the usability by cutting out the animation lock at the start of ethereal manipulation and between the lines, which will make it an instant teleport. That was the exact thing I thought they were going to do, so I'm glad to know that that is ultimately what they're doing. For those who don't play Black Mage, at the start of your teleport, I guess I'll call it, you have this little animation that takes a quarter of a second before you actually go to the location. That's getting cut out entirely. So you should just move instantly as soon as you press the skill and it becomes active. Good. The Feast, moving on from job adjustments, I guess the Feast Crystal Tower map they recently introduced, they're going to leave what people liked and take out what people didn't like. Good. Now, if only they'd add rank decay to the Feast, we might get into something. Major updates to the HUD, you'll be able to see the buffs of all your enemies as well. Good. More information's very important in PvP. Frontlines, the roulette for Frontlines will choose a certain ruler map for that day and change every day. Okay, that's just further clarification. The message book, this is all stuff they said during the live letter. Max amount of letters you can enter is close to what a typical SNS would be in Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. You can there are settings that allow the owner to only show messages after their approval, and it can store up to 60 messages, and players will need to delete old messages they don't want to keep. Let's see. They understand how players want to haul the veterans so they can practice their rotations. They say that's tough to do because they have to nail down a set rotation. Also, for some jobs that have procs or are based a lot on the encounters, such as Black Mage, Summoner, or Bard, it's tough to see how the game can check that you're really adequately prepared for situations that you'll be tested on those jobs. So they said it's difficult. They didn't say they wouldn't do it. They never say they won't do it, just that it's difficult. Cross-world link shell will disappear if you only have one person in the link shell for a set period of time. And system allow players to talk to people from other data centers, not other servers, other data centers, is still difficult to implement. Some additional fluff here. They're removing the die requirement from the fashion check because it's one of the toughest parts about it, that people need the super rare dies to get to 100 points. And then they actually ask about dies altogether, and they say they really don't want to make the certain dies such as jet black or pure white dies. They don't want to make them cheaper. Some people make a living off of selling dies that they get from their ventures, so they don't want to just change it just to make it a little bit more available. While we're on the topic of Navazu, are they a beast tribe? Yes, they can talk. What classifies a beast tribe? It's pretty loose. If we say it is, it is. Are the Kikern a beast tribe? And he said not only are they definitely beast tribes, apparently originally Kikerns were supposed to be the beast tribe for dailies in 4.2. We got a Nanta, which I'm not complaining about, but we've been really wondering about the Kikerns, we want to learn more. Everyone's waiting for a primal for them to pop up at this point, but they even have an area in Girabanya that was dedicated to being the Kikern area. So you could probably guess around where that might have been, but I mean, at some point we got to get it, right? They already talked about it once, then it's got to happen, and maybe 5.0. I don't think 4.4 personally, but 5.0, we got, like, it's got to be the Keykerns, right? Is the Doman Enclave going to be the next place like Mordona Idleshire? They said ultimately it's solo content, like the actual rebuilding of it is solo content. It just, every time someone enters, it checks flags on each player and how much reconstruction has been done, and it'll look differently for everybody. And then this is the whole Ritterana thing I mentioned earlier, where they were talking about where it is and, you know, its actual relation. And then they talk about how certain things they've added into the game before that would normally have a relation to Final Fantasy Tactics or Ivalice overall, and they've had to kind of retcon those things, or they've had to make adjustments to the story. Basically, during the 12-hour, and this is something that Carrier of Light specifically added, is that Void Ark has a boss called Cullen, which is, you know, apparently not a Lucavi, or is not from the world that these Lucavi come from, or is just not related to them at all. The Cahulan in the Void Ark is like Halicarnassus in Hawk Manor. There's a legend about these characters, and somebody, like an adventurer, says that's that entity from that legend. So an adventurer basically just called that void monster Cuhullin, and that's it. So they call it that. So they're not the same thing. The Cuhullin, the Lucavi, and the Cuhullin in Void Ark are not the same thing. So if they want to do it again, they will. If they want to use him again as a boss in the final series, or even in this series, even in the current one that's about to happen in 4.3, they can. They've made other adjustments to our tactics from Tactics in 12, such as Hashmal appearing in Ravenaster instead of in the Ritterana Lighthouse. So as long as Matsuno, who created Ivalice, says it's okay, then it's okay. But yeah, and then after that, he just talks a little bit about his communication relay between Matsuno and the development team to make sure that everything was preserved and communicated the right way. And then this is where he talks about the different mechanics that are going to pop up in here, and that you'll have a lot of fun if you go in blind. So, in other words, please look forward to it. Hi. Now, that's a lot of information to take in. A 30-minute video here. I'm half tempted to break it up into different aspects and just do a separate intro for each individual one before getting into it. But be sure to read through this, discuss it in the comment section of the video below, and be on the lookout for the patch notes, because tomorrow we're going to have a nice, juicy, super long patch note reading, overview, all that stuff video here on YouTube. I'm going to probably be doing it over live on the Twitch channel as well. And we have State of the Realm tomorrow to talk about that stuff a little bit more. But anyway, that's going to be a wrap for this video. Again, thank you to Carrier of Light for your translation work. Be sure to go over there and give them some love and support. I will see all you fine ladies and gentlemen in the next video, which will probably be about the preliminary patch notes. So I'll see you then. And until then, take care.